All right. Hey, guys, we are in Purpose Driven Life. Finishing out week, actually, is this week 4 or 5? But it is day 32 to 35. We'll at least get that one right. And you were shaped for service to God. And I just think it's so great that God, he wants us to win. And so he's given us the personality and the giftings, the strengths to be able to win if we're running our race, not somebody else's. And unfortunately, that's where I think we get it wrong, is we try and compare ourselves, run somebody else's race, maybe not valuing the strengths that we do have, not valuing our personality and wanting someone else's. And so that derails us from running in the right race. But day 32 is using what God gave you. And I think that is what he's saying, is focusing in, honing your understanding, your awareness level of your uniqueness and your identity.
Yeah. And we talked about the runner analogy in the last session as well. And I think that's so powerful because it's really a double negative. Like if I'm looking at you, Nathan, in the lane beside me running, and I'm envious, or as Rick Warren says, I project. And I think that's really an important point. So we can be envious, and that's obvious. Like Nathan's taller and faster and stronger than I am. That's clearly a negative. But the other negative is projecting. If I say, well, wait, Nathan, why aren't your first 6 gifts relational? I mean, come on, let's get with it here. I can do that. I can project on you what I think my gift set might be, and that is just as unhelpful.
Yeah.
Because that may make you feel bad or pull you back in the direction from which God is calling you to run. And so focus on that, right?
Right. I'm just thinking it really means that there's quite a lot of lose-lose situations. If I'm trying to run your race, I'm definitely going to lose because I don't have the same strengths as you. I'm going to lose if I'm projecting as well because I'm focused on your strengths and maybe, however that turns out. So the only way, I'm going to win is basically running the race that God has given me to run, utilizing the strengths that he gave me so I can win that race, which in turn gives God glory because we're honoring the gifts that he made to run the race that he gave us to run. So
that's right.
It kind of is all wrapped together. But it does mean that there's a lot of opportunities to lose, unfortunately.
That's right. You just reminded me, in the last session, we talked about the 4 passages on spiritual gifts in the New Testament. And the summary is that everyone tells us to use those gifts to serve others. And in doing so, we honor Christ and we are serving others. But the other thing that comes through in all 4 of those passages that you just touched on is God is the giver of the gifts as he chooses, it says. God gives as he chooses. And so instead of looking at my gift set and saying, well, why these? I mean, that is not only comparing myself to you, meaning why these and not his, give me his, please. That sucks the wind out of my sails.
Yeah.
Why not embrace what the gifts that God has given to me? And so I think that's really helpful. And he goes on to say that your shape, one of his clever sayings, Rick Warren's clever sayings, your shape determines your specialty. So when I determine how God has created me, as I look at my my shape that we talked about, that shape will determine my specialty. And one of the things he says again and again is he encourages using assessments, but in his opinion, the best way to learn what makes me best is through experimenting, and that's what he calls it. He says, just view it as an experimentation. Try something, and you'll know.
Yeah.
So that's how his biggest tool to determine our shape is experimentation.
And I'd say that's highlighting the fact that we're really supposed to be learners in life, and just not afraid. When something doesn't work out, it's not a failure. It's okay. Well, now I know that I'm not supposed to be in that area. So that kind of leads into the next 2 days, which is, how do we make sure that we're going to run the right race that is shaped for us? Yeah. And that is thinking and acting like a servant. And this is definitely entering one of those paradoxes so often that we see in the Bible, which is, Galatians 5. It's like, it's for freedom that Christ has set us free, but then it's saying, okay, but think and act like a servant. And I think, we're just misunderstanding what true freedom is. Freedom is operating fully in who we are. It is operating not in comparison, not according to someone else's strengths, not on a different race, not trying to strive for wins that are not ours. And so it really means taking on the humility, as Jesus did, right, in Philippians, and letting ourselves see kind of the guardrails that I'm pretty sure Dr. Henry Cloud talks about, the boundaries, helps us to operate in greater freedom, because it's keeping us on track.
That's right. Yep. And so he spends a lot of time in these few days talking about, as Nathan was saying, to be like Jesus is to be a servant. Jesus came to serve, and that's what we're called to serve as well. And he quotes John Wesley, which in my office at church, I have a painting of this that my wife gave me by John Wesley. And here's the quote: "Do all the good you can, by all the means you can, in all the ways you can, in all the places that you can, at all the times you can, to all the people you can, as long as you ever can." That's awesome. And so we are called to be servants, and he talks about what real servants are. And in short, real servants, they make themselves available. They're paying attention to the needs around them. They're doing their best with what they have. We all know we don't all have the same resources available to us.
Yeah.
They do every task with equal dedication, with all of their hearts. They're faithful to the ministry or the service, not the professional ministry necessarily, but our service, he says, is our ministry. So we're faithful to that ministry. And then finally, he says, real servants, and I love this, maintain. Here's a pastor of one of the largest churches in the world. And so I had to chuckle when he said this, because I'm like, how does he live this out? But he says, real servants maintain a low profile. And his point is that not for us to let notoriety distract you from our work.
There is a lot of psychology around the ego, and letting the ego really derail us badly. I think that the ego is one of those things that definitely really causes pastors and leaders to crash.
Absolutely. I've struggled with that. I have I've compared myself over the years with other pastors. And one time I told a friend of mine, a pastor at a different church, I confessed that to him. I said, listen, I need to tell you, I've struggled with jealousy. And I'll never forget, he was so struck by what I said, he started to tear up. And of course he forgave me, and that was really freeing for me. But it's this whole concept of being free to be who God has made me to be. And some of the counseling I've done myself, receiving on the receiving end of counseling, one woman, beautiful sister in Christ, who has years and years of counseling experience, she said to me, and Rick Warren touches on this, you have to live for an audience of one. And so for somebody who at Celebrate Recovery at times says, I'm a grateful believer in Jesus who struggles with pleasing people more than God, that statement is really meaningful for me, that Rick Warren brings out, live for an audience of one. And that's not a selfish thing. That's actually, I think part of the reason that pastor started to cry was because he thought, dude, why are you putting your desires on me, right? He knew that was inherently not helpful for either one of us. And it's beautiful. He wanted me to be me and to embrace, to use Rick Warren's language, the shape that God has given me.
Yeah. So
thinking like a servant, that's what Rick calls us to in these days. And he wraps it up. I'm just jumping ahead here to day 35. Talks a lot about this too. God's power at work in our weakness. I think of Paul, my grace is sufficient for you. 2 Corinthians 12:8 or 9, my grace is sufficient for you, for my power is perfected in 12:9, in weakness. God uses weak people. So that brings us to the end of this week of days 32 to 35. And next time we will pick it up with purpose number 5, which is you were made for a mission. And I believe that will take us through the end of this book.
I believe so, unless there's a conclusion or something that we've not got to yet. But otherwise, we look forward to seeing you next time, or definitely in person at our Celebrate Recovery meetings on Monday at 7 p.m. So have a blessed day, night, week, weekend, whenever you happen to watch this.
See you next time, guys.